wants to be different. I just want to go out and have friends and be like other girls my age.
You'll never be like them. You need to get used to that.
We have to play Sexy Red.
Oh, Mama, okay.
We have to play Sexy Red.
We'll play Sexy Red after, okay?
Hey, Zach, can we play Sexy Red after this?
Yeah, change the song. Thank you. I don't know who needs to hear this, but you don't miss him. You are just bored. Bored. B-O-R-E-D, bored. Get a hobby, girl. Okay? Get a hobby. Alright? You spend too much of your time thinking about him. You don't miss him, honey. You are just bored.
This was Saga from Bitch.
Guys, I'm freaking out over the girl that might have a dead in her backyard. I'm literally freaking the fuck out. They're digging right now. I've been like, if you haven't seen it, one of you guys put me on. I'm like talking as if this was like a show. No, but literally, this is insane. She found a rolled up carpet dug up in her backyard, and they're literally digging right now, and I'm freaking out. 2 police dogs that were specifically trained to find corpses both sat right where the rug was. So they're digging it up right now, and I'm literally freaking out. Like, that is... Like, what do you guys think? Do you guys think that there is in there, or that like tell me what you guys think. I want to know what you think.
Feel my heart, Jonas. I think it's broken. Maybe there like is something wrong with me, but like I said, I'm really happy with who I am, and I know my...
I just want to be okay. For once. I just want to feel good and healthy. I'm sick of being ill. And then we try to rest.
Should've been a rock star. But he didn't have the money for it. Goody good, should've been a rock star. But he didn't have the money for it.
Wise man closes his mouth, madman closes his fist. Young man shows his age, judgment and deceit. I bet I'm bad man don't exist. Oh, don't be exist. Good men don't exist. The things I would do to you. 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 The things I would do to you.
Made it out alive, but I think I lost it. Said that I was fine, said it from my coffin. Remember how I died when you started walking? That's my life, that's my life. I put up a fight, taking out my earrings. Don't you know the vibe? Don't you know the feeling? You should spend the night, catch me on your ceiling. That's your prize, that's your prize. Well, ooh, there you think she's so cool. Take me back and you couch me and ice from across the room. Wait, I think I've been there too. Ooh, you got me thinking she's so cool. But I know when you're just another dude. Ooh, that's so true.
No, I'm not crying because I'm a sissy and I'm a sore loser. I really hope this country goes great. But there are women that are going to die because of this. So many of them. So, I'm just thinking about them right now. Give me a few minutes. And then I'm going to toughen up a bit. Luckily, I personally didn't have to cancel out my father, my man, or my mother's vote. So I'm alright. But in the end, clearly it didn't matter. I really hope we're the ones who are brainwashed. Because there's two options here. And I'm praying I'm wrong. I actually am praying I'm wrong. Like, genuinely. I pray to Jesus Christ himself that I am the one that's wrong. Alright. Yeah.
If I said you could never touch me, you'd come over and say I looked lovely. Fall apart as it gets dark. I'm in your arms and send.
Manipulated the fuck out of me. Like, I truly thought he was this great dude because in the first 4 months of our relationship, he was. That's who he showed me. That's what, like, I thought. That's who I fell in love with. I fell in love with this person that doesn't exist.
Thoughts that go like bullets through.
I see you as you see yourself through all the books you read, overwhelmed with guilt and realizing the disease.
actually unbelievable, okay? She was kidnapped but not killed. They just buried her in a box underground. This 20-year-old girl would spend over 80 hours buried alive hoping that her family would find her. I got a lot of my information from the Morbid podcast, by the way, if you want to hear the story in great detail. Great podcast. The episode I listened to is called The Kidnapping of Barbara Jane Mackle. Barbara Jane Mackle was born to parents Robert and Jane Mackle. The family lived in Coral Gables, Florida. They were very well off. As a little girl, Barbara got everything that she wanted, but she was raised to be a very dedicated and hard worker. Barbara attended Emory University in Georgia, where she would meet her boyfriend Stuart. In 1968, she was 20 years old, still attending college. In December of that year, Barbara was extremely sick with a flu that was going around campus, so her mother Jane decided that she was going to drive to Georgia, take care of Barbara, and the two of them would then drive back together to Florida for the holidays. It seemed like the better option because Barbara was so ill. They thought it would be better if she was in a car with her mom rather than having to go to the airport, get on the plane, do the whole thing. On December 16th of 1968, Barbara and her mom get a room at a hotel that was nearby campus to sleep at before having to wake up early the next morning to start their road trip. In the early hours of December 17th, both are sleeping in the hotel room when around 4 a.m. they suddenly get a knock at their door. Jane, the mom, wakes up. She opens the door with the lock latch still on and she sees a police officer. The cop tells her that somebody named Stuart Woodward has been in a terrible car accident and he asked to come inside and speak to her and Barbara. Stuart was Barbara's boyfriend, so of course Jane immediately is like, oh my god, yes, come in. What happened? Is he okay? But when she opens the door all the way to let the police officer come inside, not only does the officer come inside, but also another man. It does not take long for Jane and Barbara to figure out what was really going on. Those two men were not cops. They were not there to inform them of any car accident. They were not there to rob or steal from the place. They were there for them. The man dressed as a cop goes for Jane, the mom. He ties up her wrists and her ankles and then places a rag soaked with chloroform over her face until she passes out. The second man is attending to Barbara, pointing a weapon at her head. Both men then force Barbara out of the hotel room and into their car that was waiting outside, leaving the mom in the hotel room alone, knocked out. In the car, the man dressed as a police officer gets in the driver's seat. The other person gets inside in the back seat with Barbara. It wasn't until they were in the car that Barbara realized the second man was not a man, it was a woman. They drive around 20 miles away until they get to a secluded wooded area. The three of them then begin walking through the woods until they reach a shallow grave that had been previously dug about 4 feet into the ground with a fiberglass box inside. Barbara, as she had been doing this entire time, was trying to plead with both of her kidnappers, saying, please, please, I will do anything. I will give you anything that you want as long as you don't make me get inside of that box. But they didn't care. They told her that if she wanted to live, she had to cooperate, and they ordered her to get inside of the box. In the box was very little food and water, which was laced with things that would knock her out: a blanket, a sweater, a fan, 2 vent tubes that went up to the surface to provide air inside the box. Those tubes would only provide enough air supply for a week. There were also sanitary supplies like a bucket for her to go to the bathroom in and a small light. As she's being forced down into this box, the female kidnapper looks at her and says, Barbara, it's going to be okay. And Barbara thinks, oh, so I am being specifically targeted because you guys know who I am because you know my name. As one of her last efforts to plead with them, she's begging for them not to do this. She's saying that her father will pay anything. He will give them as much money as they want for them to just let her go. And the man looked at her and said, we know that Mackle will pay. So they know her first name, they know her last name, they know her family, they know how wealthy they are. It was clear that the motive here was money. They lay her down inside the box, they inject her with something, they give her a piece of paper to hold up, they take her pictures, they place a lid on the box and then shovel 2 feet of dirt on top, burying her alive. The entire time, Barbara could hear the dirt being shoveled on top of her and she was screaming and crying until she was left in complete silence. Inside the box, she was also left with a note from her kidnappers. The note explained how she was buried underneath the house that her kidnappers would be staying in, how the light was only to be used when she absolutely needed it because it didn't have that much battery power, how she was buried underneath water, so if she did try to escape, water would seep in and she would drown before they could get her out, how the box was built so strong that she would not be able to break it, how the water that they left for her to drink was laced with stuff to put her to sleep, and they wrote that sleep would be the best way that she would have to pass the time. Again, how the air supply was only enough to last her a week, and how they left her only enough food and water to survive 7 days. They explained that everything that she had would only be enough to keep her alive for 7 days, and the note ended by saying, quote, we're sure your father will pay the ransom we have asked for in less than 1 week. When your father pays the ransom, we will tell him where you are and he will come for you. Should he fail to pay, we will release you, so be calm and rest. You'll be home for Christmas one way or the other, end quote. So what kind of horrible, evil people would do this? The man was 23-year-old Gary Christ. He had a long criminal background. He was actually a prison escapee. He had escaped prison after he was sentenced for stealing a car. The female was Ruth Shire. She was around 3 years older than Gary and they were in a romantic relationship. The two of them had been working and planning this kidnapping for months. They were stalking Barbara, picking her to be their victim because they did know her family and they did know that they had money. They learned her schedule, her family's names, her boyfriend's name, and everything they needed in order to pull off this kidnapping for ransom. Okay, so Barbara's inside this box underground, scared out of her mind. Meanwhile, back at the hotel, her mom had woken up. She realized that her daughter was taken and she called 911 immediately. Police were on their way. Jane then called Barbara's boyfriend Stuart, who was the one closest to her because he was on campus office and the hotel was nearby, and then Stuart called Barbara's father to let him know the terrible situation they were now in. Robert immediately rushed to the airport and got the first flight out to Georgia. The family was wealthy, they had connections, they had power, and because of that, the FBI was on this from day one. Robert gets to Georgia, he picks up his wife Jane, they fly back home to their house in Florida. The day they get back home, they receive a phone call. The caller directs them to walk outside of this house to this specific tree where they would find a 3-page ransom letter. To summarize the letter, and in the podcast that I mentioned earlier, they read through the entire note. It's very long, it's 3 pages, so if you want to go listen to that, they read the entire letter at the 42-minute and 50-second mark. But basically it says, we kidnapped your daughter, we have her, she's in a box underground where nobody will find her, you have 7 days to pay us $500,000 in $20 bills. If you follow our instructions, the biggest one being do not contact the police and pay the money, we will tell you where she is so you can find her. If you don't pay the money, or if you try and get law enforcement involved, we will never ever tell you where your daughter is. And after 7 days, her air, water, and food supply will run out and she will suffocate and die. The letter says they must pay all cash, placing the cash inside of a suitcase. Once the money is ready, they were to put out an ad in a newspaper, and once the kidnappers saw the ad, that would be their sign to call back and tell Robert where to drop off the money. Robert was to dress in all white and go deliver and drop off the money himself. Within 12 hours of the money being dropped off, the family would receive a letter explaining Barbara's whereabouts. After reading the letter, Robert got the money immediately, $500,000, which in today's money would be $4.5 million. The first attempt to drop off the ransom failed when 2 officers drove by, causing the kidnappers to run away on foot. The FBI then found the kidnappers' abandoned car, which contained photos of a man in a police hat and registration papers under the name George Deacon. Trying to figure out who George Deacon was, the FBI traced George Deacon to the University of Miami, where supposedly he worked at building ventilated boxes. They spoke to his boss, who gave them the name of a female, Ruth, and they said that Ruth was George's girlfriend. So now they have Ruth's name, who is one of the kidnappers, but they still don't know who this George Deacon man is. The FBI is then contacted by a local man in Georgia, claiming that he just bought a small trailer from a man and he found some odd paperwork inside. The paperwork were letters, and after testing the DNA on those letters and comparing it to the DNA they found in the kidnappers' abandoned car, they were able to conclude that this George Deacon guy was actually 23-year-old prison escapee Gary Christ. Now the FBI had the names, but the Mackle family was still desperate, so they tried to deliver the money and drop it off for a second time, which was a success. After the kidnappers received the money, the FBI was contacted with Barbara's whereabouts. The FBI rushed to the scene and started digging up everywhere until they eventually found the box. They found Barbara, who was luckily still alive after 83 hours of being buried. She was severely dehydrated and she had lost 10 pounds. Barbara would later say the only thing that kept her going was the thought of spending Christmas and being reunited with her family, which makes me so happy to say that she was able to do that. Meanwhile, the kidnappers Gary and Ruth were on the run. They had gone their separate ways. They were no longer together. To escape, Gary bought a boat, and the media had reported this case. Obviously, it was all over the news, and the boat seller called the police to say that a man that looked just like Gary had just purchased his boat. A helicopter flew over the water and followed Gary and the boat until he was eventually arrested. However, they would not be able to find Ruth until March of 1969, but eventually she was also arrested. Gary was convicted and he was sentenced to life in prison in 1969, but he was released on parole after only 10 years. However, he landed himself back in prison, but then again was released in November of 2010. Ruth was also convicted, but she was only served to 7 years and she only served 4. Let me know what you guys think, or if you have heard of this podcast before, and if there are any other stories on the Morbid podcast that you guys want to hear about. They have so many crazy ones on there. But that is all I have on the kidnapping of Barbara Mackle. Hope you guys are having the best day. If not, go do something to make it the best day. I love you all so much, and I will see you in my next video. Massive kiss on the forehead to every single one of you.
How is that possible?
So I wanted to come on here on behalf of my sister, on behalf of my family, and share our experiences with Bree Powers. So just to start, it's really mind-blowing to me how many people have had these collective experiences with her. It's actually really disturbing. The videos that I've seen on here are inexcusable behavior, disgusting. She should be in jail. So about 3 years ago, my sister became friends with Bree's ex. She did not like that. She didn't like it at all. She started stalking and harassing my sister and my whole family, sending horrible messages. These weren't just like insulting messages, like, oh, you're fat, you're hideous, whatever. It was threats. She threatened to kill my sister. She threatened to stab my other sister. She messaged my grandma. She messaged my aunt. She messaged pretty much every relative that we had, saying really disgusting things. She at one point messaged my 13-year-old sister, at the time she was 13, about very inappropriate things, like pussy juice, and just stuff that you shouldn't be messaging a 13-year-old. My sister, of course, would block her on everything. We would block her on everything, but she would make different accounts. It was consistent. It was every single day. She messaged my sister on different phone numbers multiple times a day. How she got the phone numbers? Who knows? I don't know. She was sending her death threats. It was really, really, really severe. My sister could not change her phone number because at the time she had a business. She had hundreds of clients, and she's not going to inconvenience herself with changing her phone number. Like, that would change, it would just mess up everything. It was extremely inconvenient to change her phone number. So that was kind of the last resort that she came to. At the end of the day, it really just became her only option with changing her phone number. She had to change her phone number because it was completely stalking. It was completely stalking. This went on for years. This went on for years, even after my sister was no longer friends with her ex. It got so severe that one night she actually broke into the place that my sister was renting. My sister got home late one night. She didn't lock the front door. She forgot to. She got into the shower. She was showering, and then she heard the door open. Bree pulls back the curtains, and my sister is terrified. She's terrified. And Bree starts calling her names. She says, "You're fat and you're ugly." And she starts to try to fight her. It's so insane because this sounds like something from a TV show. Like, it sounds like something you would be watching, like, in a cheesy early 2000s TV show. This is real. This is legit. She starts saying, "You're fat, you're ugly." She tries to start to fight her. She actually attempts to assault her. My sister puts her arms up and basically says, "I'm not going to touch you. Get out, get out, get out." So, of course, she got the police involved. Of course, she filed charges, but a stalking injunction, if anybody knows anything about a woman filing a stalking injunction with the police, it's rough. It was really hard because she lived out of state. It was a super lengthy process. But basically, long story short, it's kind of a situation where if Bree contacts her, then she could get into huge trouble. She could get arrested. She could be charged. My sister moved out of the country for about a year. She still tried to request her Instagram while she was out of the country. And keep in mind, this is a time period in 3 years. This is 3 years, and my sister's not even in contact with her ex anymore. Like, she's that fucking mental. Also, before my sister put herself on private, put all of her, Instagram, Facebook, whatever, on private, Bree went through her whole friends list and messaged those nasty things to my sister's friends list. So it was like elderly old ladies, like neighbors from when we were, 12 years old, messaging my sister going, "What is going on? Like, who is this girl?" So it really sucks because obviously when you're stalked, it's like you're constantly watching your back, and it's just not something you really want to speak up on, especially on social media. So the fact that this is all happening now and sort of like trending and people are coming out is super, super important. And I really think if you have had an experience with her, you need to contact the police because she is very mentally unwell. It's not like a joke. I mean, she's very mentally ill. My own personal experience with her was basically me living, like, I live in California. I don't even live in Utah anymore. I live in California, and she would basically make fake Facebook accounts trying to contact me about my sister. It was crazy. And of course, my sister's like screenshot everything. I'm trying to file a stalking injunction, whatever. It just sucks that honestly she hasn't faced any real consequences to my knowledge. Like, I don't really know exactly what's going on with her, but to my knowledge, she hasn't really faced real consequences. I mean, the TikToks that I've seen, the things that she's done, she needs to be charged. She needs to be behind bars. I don't know how she is out doing what she's doing. It does not make any sense to me. It's just really horrible too, because on my sister's wedding day, okay, she contacts her fiance on their wedding day. I don't know if she knew it was the wedding day. I don't know if it was a coincidence. She probably did somehow. I don't know. Basically sending her a TikTok video that she made about her, slandering her name. This is on her wedding day. She's getting her hair and makeup done, and of course she just has to come in and try to ruin shit. This is a very condensed version of the story. Like I said, it went on for 3 years. It's really scary. It's really horrible. And I'm sorry to anyone who has ever come in contact with Bree Powers because she's crazy.
I lied. Because this story that I'm about to tell you is the scariest story I've ever heard. If you're new here, hi. I just talk about some pretty scary stuff, and recently I opened an email where anyone who finds this page would be able to submit their ghost stories. And let me tell you, not only have I been getting an abundance of stories that I have loved reading that are from every corner of the earth, these are actually scary. What I mean by actually scary is exactly that. They actually freak me out. On my last video, I said this was the scariest story that I've ever heard. This one. So I just heard scratching, and as you can see, it's still day out, and that's the only time I really film these videos is during the day because I'm a scaredy cat.
So I don't know what that's about, because I thought it was my boyfriend pranking me. So I looked outside and there's no one there. Only when I did the intro for this person. So I'm going to redo it, and if it happens again, I hope it's on video. So anyways, this story comes from Dakota, who opens the email like this. This is the story about a who disguised itself as a little girl and haunted me for 2 years. Dakota then gives us some background context and says that she's a medium. She has seen, felt, heard, and touched spirits since she was around 5 years old. Which in retrospect is really scary when you think about it. As she says, it all started when she was staying at her mom's house 2 hours away. She had a friend who lived right in front of the woods, and they decided to play hide and go seek. So Dakota finds a great hiding spot in between a shed and a chain link fence. And she says she was hiding, looks over to her right, and on the other side of the fence is a little girl staring at her. And as soon as her and this little girl made eye contact, the little girl reached through the chain link fence and grabbed her wrist. Dakota yanks her hand back and looks back at this little girl, and she is not there anymore. It is also to be noted that this was around fall time, so there were leaves on the ground and branches and twigs and etc. And she didn't hear anyone walk away or run. So Dakota runs out, tries to tell her friend what had happened, and her friend is just not having it because she's scared. Fast forward 2 months, and she's back at her dad's house and having a sleepover with an old friend. As Dakota and her friend are talking to each other on her bed, she looks over at the doorway, and the little girl is standing right in the doorway. She didn't really think anything about it because at the time, all the neighbor kids were allowed to just kind of walk in her house. And I know families like that, so I understand. But she did a double take, and the little girl was gone the next time she looked. She asked her friend, "Did you see someone?" And her friend said, "No, I didn't see anyone." And Dakota said, "Little did I know this was the beginning of a 2-year ordeal." Dakota says every day since then, she sees this little girl in her house. And this little girl did not talk. She just stared at Dakota a lot of the time. And sometimes she would only show half of her face from around the corner. And I'm going to quote this. But her favorite thing to do was watch me sleep. Dakota includes in her email that she likes sleeping in complete darkness. And the only thing that is radiating light in her room is her alarm clock that is blue. And she says every single night she would wake up and see this little girl standing in the doorway, watching her sleep. Dakota says that the most active this little girl was when she was home alone, cleaning her room. And Dakota, while cleaning her room, looks over into the living room, and just for some context, she lives in a trailer, so it's completely open concept, so you can look through rooms. She looks into the living room and sees a little girl standing there, watching her. As soon as they make eye contact, the little girl runs into the kitchen. So Dakota follows her. And once she goes into the kitchen, the little girl's standing in front of the fridge. The moment they make eye contact, the little girl runs into her dad's room. So she goes into her dad's room. Nobody's there. She's looking around. Nothing. Hears a loud bang coming from the laundry room. Goes into the laundry room. Sees the little girl standing in front of the washer and dryer. Then she runs back into the kitchen, and Dakota didn't see her the rest of the day. And Dakota says that it was really common for this little girl to not speak ever, but she would want Dakota's attention, so she would run around and kick things and knock things off counters and slam cabinets, etc. But fast forward 2 years, and Dakota's obviously used to it by now, but she hasn't seen this little girl in 4 months. Until one day, she saw her in her dream, and it was Dakota's first lucid dream. Dakota says that she goes to sleep, wakes up, and everything in her dream feels so real. She turns over at the clock, and it reads 3:16. When Dakota turns her head back around, there the little girl is. And she looks normal little girl that she's seen for the past 2 years at this point. And all of a sudden, this little girl starts to look really mangled and disgusting. She starts developing this smile and these teeth and sprints at Dakota, where Dakota falls back in her bed and wakes up. Looks over at the clock, 3:16. Dakota gets up, goes to the bathroom, and as she's standing up from using the bathroom, the little girl's standing in the doorway. She looked like the same little girl that she's seen the past 2 years, until again, she looked really mangled and disgusting and sprints at Dakota, where Dakota falls backwards screaming, and they had this animal cage in their bathtub at the time that they were cleaning, falls back on that, and she could feel the cage under her. But nonetheless, she wakes up again. And it is again 3:16 a.m. But at this point, Dakota is too scared to move and too scared to do anything, so she just sits there until the sun comes up, where she feels safe. Dakota then, that morning, started to feel this burning sensation on her back, goes and looks in the mirror, and there's a huge gash on her back from where she fell onto something. Her then best friend comes over later that day and also has spiritual connections, and tells her about this dream that she had where she was watching in third person and verbatim describes the dream that Dakota had twice. And at this point in time, Dakota did not tell her what was going on. Dakota then ends her email by telling us that if you see a clock or a phone in your dream, it means you're not really dreaming. And as corny as it sounds, she really and truly believes that this little girl was disguised as trying to get her when she was in her most vulnerable state, sleeping. But that experience was 5 years ago, and she hasn't seen that little girl since. And this is all I'm going to say. I don't know how people deal with that stuff for years. I dealt with it for a month, and no. That story was really long. However, I think it was the best story I've read so far. Anyways, that's going to do it for me. Stay tuned for my ghost stories.